some good level of participants, and as more continue to join, I think it will be okay to start now. Good afternoon or good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to this workshop that AFRAA is staging today in partnership with Visa on the topic of airline payment performance. This is a very important subject, and for the build-up that culminated to today's workshop was a survey that AFRAA did with Visa last year, the last quarter of last year, and we subsequently released a white paper. And quite important is to note that to understand the African airline payment landscape is forming a good basis for us to see how we can alleviate those pain points. Just to give you some highlights of that survey, we had quite a good number of responses, but I'll just give you the top 3 highlights of that survey. So in regards to payment architecture, very important to note this. African airlines are currently prioritizing compliance to regulation. Of course, this is very important, but this comes at the detriment of enhancing operational efficiency and also at the detriment of customer experience. Second observation that came out from the survey with the airlines is that there is significant potential for African airlines to leverage on digital tools and address broader execution challenges. So our main challenge on this point is there's a lot of execution of payments that need to be addressed. And the third top 10 observation that came from the survey is, while the payment approval rate is moderate in Africa, fraud management can be improved. And this will strengthen the security measures and reduce vulnerabilities. So these are the key top 3 pointers that came from that survey. And from that survey, it's the reason why we'll sit down today with Visa, unpack these findings and get to see how we can, as Africa, enhance airline payments. And for those who may not have had an opportunity to interact with this white paper, I'll like to request you to check on the chat box. My colleagues will drop a link through which you can access that survey. So welcome everyone. This is a very important workshop, and we are very happy to have registrations of over 100 participants, over 25 airlines from the African continent. And we also have a few civil aviation authorities, someone from the university, as well as other solution providers. Welcome all. I see we have from the airline side, we have AfriJet, Fly Gabon, Air Algeria, Air Botswana, Air Burkina. Welcome to the workshop. Air Senegal, Air Tanzania, Air Zimbabwe, Sky Airlines, Cameco, TAG Angola Airlines, Egypt Air, Eswatini Air, Ethiopian Airlines, welcome on board. We also have Etihad Airways, Ibom Air from Nigeria, Jambojet, Kenya Airways, LAM Mozambique, Roll Air Maroc, South African Airways, Rwanda Air, Safari Link, and Tunis Air. And we also have Uganda Airlines. Welcome everyone on board. While we unpack this important subject on airline payments in Africa, we want to invite you to put on the chat box what are your top expectations from this workshop. And it is our hope that by the end of the workshop, we will be able to have addressed your expectations. I would like to start with a very simple but critical question. What is the most expensive room in your airline? What is the most expensive room? Picture that. Is it your headquarters? Is it your training facility for those who have training facilities? Is it your simulator? No, it's actually your shopping cart. Yes, it is your shopping cart because right now for many airlines, that's where revenue is being left behind. And some of the highlights from the survey actually reveal that. We have the big challenge of failed airline payments. So if you have a revenue base of, let's say, I'm just giving a figure, $200 million. So let's say you have $2 million, $200 million of online sales. And your authorization rate is 78%. So if you increase by only 5%, the authorization rate from 78 to 83%, you will actually have $10 million of recovered airline sales. So out of 200 million, your sales base, you have enhanced 10 million in recovered sales. So keep those figures in mind as we go through today's workshop, because the reason is that we want to really get to narrow down on what the African airlines are having as pain points on airline payments, how we can enhance that. And this is why we have put this together with Visa. Visa is one of AFRAA partners, joined AFRAA as recent as last year. And between last year to date, we've done quite a lot. And we intend to continue doing so much more with Visa. The main objective being to use the technical expertise from Visa to support airlines and eventually to develop the air transport industry in Africa. So first things first, just to take you through today's agenda, what is on the lineup. We'll start with welcome remarks. We shall have AFRAA Secretary General and Luca Fossanti from Visa to give a few welcome remarks just to set the pace of the workshop. And then we have 4 lined up presentations. The first one is on payment optimization, and this will be done by our colleagues from Visa. The second one is on this very important point I mentioned on authentication and authorization. Get to understand the difference and how we can enhance that in African context. And the third presentation is going to be on e-commerce pillars and the key layers to improve your authentication rates. And the fourth presentation of the day, we shall be looking at airline use case. We have a few of them just to better understand those airlines that are getting it right. What are they doing and how can we borrow the examples to get to improve our airline payments? And then we shall have at the tail end an opportunity to engage with our Visa experts for Q&A. So how we'll run the show, during each presentation, if you have a question, just post it on the Q&A tab. You may wish to also put, if you have a comment or a remark, you can use the comments chat. So if you have a question, just kindly use the Q&A tab. So we'll pick that. And after each presentation, the presenters will address that. And if at the end we have any other point that has not been addressed during the presentation, there we shall have an opportunity to ensure that we address those questions, and then we shall wrap up. So for the next couple of hours, we want to really ensure that we do a deep dive onto airline payments enhancement in Africa. And to start us off, I want to invite AFRAA Secretary General to give his remarks. But before that, just to introduce our Visa experts, they will also introduce themselves. We have Luca Fossanti, who is the Director Airline SME for Central Europe, Middle East and Asia and Africa for Visa. And we have Arbab Wakar Khan, who is the Director Client Success and Client Services at Visa. So they will be the ones to really take us through this workshop. Please feel free to interact with them. Welcome, Luca, and welcome, Arbab.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to start us off, remarks from AFRAA Secretary General, Mr. Abderrahmane Berté. You have the floor.
Thank you, Maureen. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome our member airlines attending this workshop today. And I also want to thank Visa for staging this workshop with AFRAA. I want to thank Luca and Arbab for animating this workshop today. Maureen said our partnership with Visa started in 2024. Since then, we have been working together, and we made a survey, and in June 2025, was released a research paper, a white paper by Visa. So we are continuing this partnership for the benefit of our members. And I hope that today workshop on the theme of airline payment performance will be informative and fruitful for the attendance. So thank you again. Welcome to all, and have a very good workshop. Thank you very much, and over to you, Maureen.
Thank you very much, Abdirahman. Now we have some remarks from Visa by Luca. Luca, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Maureen. First of all, thanks to AFRAA for the great support and the role it is playing in the continent to support African airlines. We'd like to give the welcome to all the airlines that are joining us today. Bienvenue particulier à tous les compagnies aériennes de langue francophone. And we would really wish that we would having a great session, very, very interactive. We see already the first question coming. The webinar is structured to support you. We also have a very diverse mix of attendees. I mean, it's a different region in Africa, different airlines in terms of business model, different also level of expertise in payment. So you will see how we have structured the webinar to make it somehow relevant for everyone. This, of course, then allow after the webinar to reach out and particularly if you are already a payment expert and you would like to continue discussing with us, please do not hesitate. Our email address is on the deck as well. So really, again, thanks to AFRAA and thanks to all of you for joining today.
Thank you very much, Luca, for your remarks. We do look forward to a very informative and interactive webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who joined us later after we started, we are welcoming you on board. Post on the chat box your expectations from the workshop. We want to ensure that we address that as much as possible. And the presentations after the webinar, we will share that with anyone who registered for this webinar, as well as the recording. So you shall have the recording, and you shall have the slide deck and the contacts of our experts from Visa, for those who may wish to engage with them subsequently later. We also shared on the chat box the link to access the white paper, which was prepared by Visa in collaboration with AFRAA, following the survey that we did on airline payment landscape in Africa. So I'm looking at the chat box. I'm seeing we have already questions coming in. So we shall take that in after we have the first presentation. If you have any expectations, just put that on the chat box. We want to ensure that we keep that to track whether we shall follow and address your expectations by the tail end of the workshop. So for the next almost 2 hours, I want to now invite our experts from Visa to take us through the presentations. And I'll stop sharing my screen so that you can share your screen on your end, Luca, Arbab.
Yeah, I'm sharing. Please let me know if you can see it, Maureen.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Lovely. Okay, so let's start. And it is again, thanks to everyone for joining. Today we will walk you through the airline payment performance, sharing a few insights from, as Maureen said, from the surveys we ran, but also from the overall industry best practices that at Visa we can see. Starting with you will have it. There is a short, it's a confidential notice. I mean, it is, but again, everything is going to be shared. You will have the registration and the deck. Now, what are we covering today? As Maureen explained us through the agenda, we will start with a quick introduction about Visa and Visa Consulting and Analytics, just to introduce ourselves so that you know better who we are. And then we will take you through the first presentation, that is why payment optimization is important. Maureen, in her introduction, already gave us some numbers, and please keep this number very vivid in your mind. We are talking primarily about revenue, and this, of course, has an impact in your bottom line and in the performance of your airline. Then Arba will take us through the introduction to authentication and authorization. There will be, I would say, an overview in terms of high-level elements, but also some very interesting deep dive into more specific and relevant topics for the payment. This will lead us into the e-commerce pillars, where we will go more in details and understanding how you can improve your performance and how you can maximize your direct online sales, leading to the case studies and, of course, the Q&A at the end of each presentation. So let's move on, and let me tell you a couple of seconds about Visa. I mean, Visa, of course, I believe requires no introduction. I mean, it is, we are the leading payment company in the world. Hopefully, a piece of us is in your pocket and in your wallet. But let me tell you more about Visa Consulting and Analytics. We work in the entire world. I mean, it is our regional office for Africa is in Dubai, where the CEMEA market support center is. But we also have regional office throughout Africa. We have a regional office in Johannesburg, in Nairobi, in Lagos, in Cairo, and of course other national office all around. We are a network. Visa Consulting and Analytics is a big player. We are more than 1,500 professionals in consulting, data science, and macroeconomists. We worked over 2,000 projects in 2024 out of 75 locations in the world. And of course, as Visa, we work with issuers, with acquirers, with processors, but we also work with merchants, and airlines among the merchants in most of the country are often the leading merchants in terms of volumes, in terms of complexity, in terms of business. As VCA, we work, of course, in strategy. And it is our consulting skills are very, very similar to McKinsey, Bain, BCG, where most of our colleagues come. Of course, there are industry experts, and it is like myself. But we also work in digital user experience. We work, as we said before, in data scientists, implementing also the recommendation, and then we provide to airlines. And among the different audience that we have today, some of the airlines that Maureen was mentioning at the beginning, they are already Visa partners. And we work together with them on loyalty, on co-brand card, ensuring that they can maximize the revenue opportunity coming from their loyalty programs. Last but not least, we have also a very strong Visa University area where we will train your team in payment, in loyalty, and other topics that you are interested in. So on the airline practice, very, very high level understanding of where we work and what we do. Of course, Visa is a payment solution, so we are supporting our client, our airlines, in payment optimization. We work through an airline health check. I mean, it is that we will see more in details today. We do payment optimization deep dive, authorization and fraud optimization. And of course, as we see all the data, I mean, it is every time there is a transaction, we can see it. We work on a regular basis with the airline, monitoring and improving their performance. On quick note on other area, we work, as I mentioned, on co-brand cards. Visa is the leading co-brand card in the world in terms of co-brands with airlines, and of course, as mentioned before, we were already with airlines like Royal Air Maroc, Egypt Air, Kenya Airways, and we are really looking forward to work with more airlines. So if you're interested in co-brand as well, please reach out after this webinar. A co-brand card, as strong it can be, requires a strong loyalty program. And that's why we also work with airlines on loyalty. We work we can assess your loyalty program, designing your loyalty strategy, building, understanding and calculating the value of your miles, and of course, improving overall the perception and the quality of your CVP, the customer value proposition. Also, among what you see today here in the screen, final word on loyalty fraud. I mean, it is, Maureen was talking about payment fraud, and it's also in the payment optimization and what we will discuss today. But fraud can also be a strong component of loyalty. So if you have the feeling or the perception that you might have some fraud in loyalty programs, please reach out. And then finally, the last area is whatever we do in terms of data-driven planning. We work on network planning. Next week, we will be in Hong Kong at Roots World. We work on revenue management. We can work on enhancing your stopover program and overall understanding in terms of who are your customer segmentation, persona, and everything that is related to the understanding of your clients. Now, a couple of words about ourselves. I will introduce myself and then Arbab will do the same. As Maureen mentioned, I'm the airline subject matter expert for Visa Consulting and Analytics based out of Dubai. My background is not payment. I'm primarily an airline person, a colleague. I love to say that today I'm among colleagues. I spent 25 years in the airline industry, in revenue management, network planning, sales. Before joining Visa, I was leading the total offer practice at Amadeus Business Consulting and working already with several airlines. In terms of airlines, I've been working in Etihad, in Qatar Airways, and other airlines before in Europe. Arbab, I'll leave it to you to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Luca. So yes, my name is Arbab. I'm also based in Dubai. I've been with Visa for last 10 years. My background is mostly banking and payments. In Visa also, I've been through different roles. In my current role, I'm looking after client success for key merchants across GCC region, which, as Luca mentioned, when we look at key merchants, it's mostly airlines. So I'm working closely with some of the biggest airlines in the region as a client success manager.
Thank you, Arbab. And now let's move to the start of the real content about payment. And starting, we have a question for you. So why is it important to improve payment KPI? Option number 1, additional revenue. Option B, lower cost. Option C, higher customer satisfaction. Option D, all of them. So I think Maureen will collect all the answers and then we will see them together.
Thank you for completing the poll. We'll be closing it in about 25 seconds. Thank you. You have the results? Arbab, on the screen, we have the summary of the results. You can take it from there.
Maybe Maureen, you can lead because I don't see the results as I'm presenting. So maybe you can.
So Luca, I can help you.
Yeah,
so additional revenue is 18%. Candidates, participants. Lower cost is 8%. Higher customer satisfaction is 26%, and 66% thinks it's all of them.
Yeah, and thank you, Arbab. And usually, as when you have an all of them at the end, it's the answer, and it is so well done for the 66%. Of course, the first candidate is additional revenue. Of course, if you improve your payment KPIs, and here we're talking about millions of opportunity, and it is easily you can lead into additional revenue. But Arba will also take us through lower cost. I mean, it is improving your payment KPI lead in terms of lower cost of transaction, and it is and lower cost overall in terms of sales. Of course, higher customer satisfaction. It's very frustrating as a client when you are about to pay and you have your credit card in your hands, and for whatever reason the credit card doesn't go through. Over here, of course, and some client might have a multiple credit card, and it didn't try with another one, but very often they might really shift either to an OTA, and of course over there maybe the client remains with you if you are part of the OTA, but your higher cost of sales. And a worst case scenario, the moment the client cannot pay and cannot book with you, he will shift to another airlines and you lose the entire revenue. So all three are very relevant and very important items. So well done to all the participants that answered D. And it is, as it was all of them, the other participants were not wrong, okay, but there is more in terms of relevance. So let's start now. Let me move to the next slide, and we will see just a quick summary and recapping. I will go very quickly about our partnership with AFRAA. As Maureen mentioned, we started in 2024. Our partnership continues. I mean, it is, we look forward really in 2026 also to keep on working with all the airlines. We had launched last year, we had a similar webinar on loyalty. I think the recordings are available. If you are interested, please reach out and we can take you through. And we publish and we work with the network planning committee on the relevance of our data for network planning opportunities. In April, we published the Airline Payment Maturity Index research paper in conjunction with AFRAA. If you also can download it from the link on, of course, as well on the link that Maureen posted in the chat. And then we were on stage in Kigali, and we had the pleasure to meet most of you in the 13th Aviation Stakeholder Convention. We continue improving the revenue for African Airlines. On a daily basis, beyond this webinar, we work already with some of the airlines that are participating today, and we look forward to work with the remaining part. This just for your reference, the document that we published, the research paper, and from the research paper, let me take some very, very high-level strategic understanding of why it is important. So acquisition on your airline. Your effort of your sales team, of your direct sales team, goes in the direction of more and more acquiring and developing your direct channel. This, of course, lead into a cost of acquisition. And it's important then the final step is the payment. And so don't underestimate how a wrong payment transaction, or I would say a non-approved authorization, can then lead into losing all the costs that you have invested in developing your website and your acquisition strategy. Then, of course, you will issue the ticket, and finally you will recognize the revenue. So seamless payment experience drive higher conversion and repeat business. Higher approval is more revenue. Less friction, higher conversion, and loyalty. Again, if a transaction and the booking goes through the first time, and every time I try to book on
Hello, Arbab. We don't seem to hear Luca.
Yes, I think it's connection issue at his end. Let me ping him quickly.
Okay. So as we wait for Luca to come back, from the connection challenge. I just wish to read from the chat box some of the expectations I'm seeing from the audience. Pastor Gospel Nkamare, who is Manager Control Process and Compliance at IBOM Air, has a couple of expectations. The first one is enhanced understanding of payment challenges to gain insights into the common payment issues faced by African airlines, including delays, discrepancies, and inefficiencies. It's a good one. Second expectation from Pastor Gospel Nkamare is best practices and solutions. Learn about effective strategies, technological solutions, and industry best practices to improve payment processing speed, accuracy, and reconciliation. Thank you. We do hope that we can address all that by the end of the webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to put on the comments on the chat box your expectations that you have for the workshop, and then we shall ensure that by the end of it, we have addressed as much as possible based on the presentations by our colleagues from Visa. Welcome back, Luca. You can hear us? I think connection challenge. So I take the second lineup of the expectations from Elom Anani. This is the country manager, SKY Nairobi. First expectation is what Visa is doing to secure airlines sales. It's a good one. Second one is what Visa will be doing in case of default of payment from EasyPay agents. And third expectation is why a refund process is taking long in case of cancellation, and how long is the refund process in case of the cancellations. Thank you very much, Elom and Pastor Gospel. And welcome back, Luca.
And apologies, Maureen. I think I was talking about losing revenue and I lost the connection.
No worries. I took the opportunity to read some of the expectations we have from our participants, and now we are ready for you.
Yeah.
The floor.
Okay. So again, apologies. I mean, it is connection probably proved to be unstable. I mean, it is and deep apologies to all the participants for this inconvenience. So we were talking about losing revenue, and again, I lost the connection. So it is talking about. I think probably the question we will address them during the break. I mean, it is and we'll continue on the presentation. In terms of revenue loss, as we say, payment decline, abandoned cards. I mean, it is your client are willing to pay and they're not able to, but also lost ancillary sales. The moment we are into the manage my booking session, or we are at the airport, here we're talking primarily about online experience today, but of course you need also to be able to collect payment for passenger at the airport. Think about a passenger trying to board with some additional hand luggage that is not allowed to carry, and you already pass immigration. You're not able to collect the payment because you don't have the right POS, you don't have the right devices, and you have to let the passenger go through without collecting this additional revenue. Operational inefficiency. This is a cost because you require more staff. You require more people intervening on the transaction to rectify anything that went wrong. You need you have delays in the reconciliation, and you struggle with the fraud disputes. This, of course, then lead into a frustration for the customer, brand image, and passenger abandoning your airlines. So this is, I would say, a high-level understanding of the cost and why you should be really paying attention on limiting the payment failures, because payment failures is lost ticket sales and weakened customer trust. Now, going into the airline payment maturity index, let's review together what we published. As Maureen said, we had a very, very interesting survey, and we presented it in Kigali. If you were not there, or if you were there, but let's also refresh your mind. We were scoring all the answer in a range from 1 to 5. I mean, it is where 1 was the lowest and 5 was the highest. So looking into also, we had 15 questions that we were submitting, and we had the answer as following. So The August was on payment strategy. So the 3 questions on payment strategy recorded an average of 2.86, 2.43 on payment architecture. The lowest one, passenger experience, 2.38. So the panel of airlines recognized that the passenger experience that airlines in Africa are providing need attention and require investment. Commercial performance, 2.51, and internal readiness. How are the team skilled? How are the team able to then build and the right strategy and the right architecture and designing the right experience, recorded at 2.44. So overall, the sentiment of the airlines in the continent is an awareness that there is a margin of improvement. And it says that we are on average lower than half of the scale. So this has an impact. And we see this impact through all our data, I mean, it is as Visa. So what you see in the graph here is a comparison of the performance of all the airlines in Africa versus all the airlines in the world. Okay, and this, of course, in order to have the full yearly data, we took 2024 and we remain consistent with what we published in the paper. But you see that every single quarter, the performance of the African airlines was between 5 and 7% lower than the average. So out of $100, African airlines are cashing on average $5 to $7 less than an average airline in the world. This number is really big. And think about if all the airlines in Africa would achieve a 7% revenue improvement, how important would it be for the economy of the continent? Because yes, passengers might keep on traveling, but then we'll travel with non-African airlines. We'll travel with carrier coming from other continents and serving your countries. This has also an impact not only on the amount, but also on the authorized transactions. So the impact on the authorized transactions it is a little bit lower. What does it mean? That on average, when you have high transaction value, business class passengers that are booking multiple person in the same PNRs, your decline is higher. So the fact that the amount is higher than the transaction, it means that you have a problem on high value transactions. And this is, of course, even worse. So let's see how then also the African airlines in the panel answer. Based on all the answers collected, we built 5 different clusters. And the 2 axes are around planning and are around execution. So the first one is how can planning is about how you structure, how you design all the architecture, all the payment experience, how is your strategy, how strong you are. And then the execution is how you put in place what you have designed. These lead into these 5 clusters. And it's starting from the best, visionary leaders. I mean, it is able to plan and able to execute. And we have here a limited number of answers. I mean, it's only 5 of the airlines were finding themselves into this category. We have then competent executors. Maybe not a very complex strategy, not a very complex architecture, but honestly well done, well executed, and starting from the basis by doing them properly. Then developing strategy. Very, very low planning, low strategy, but when it is execution also, I would say, not perfect. And then we go into the problematic area. Emerging planners, airlines that are they're trying to improve, but they're not really able to do. And then we have airlines that, I mean, they would know how to, what to do and how to do it, but for whatever reason, they're not really able to implement it. And often this lack of implementation capacity can be supported. I mean, it is, as we mentioned before, as Visa, we're really happy to discuss with you and understand how we can support your airlines to implement your strategy and improve the way your payment architecture is designed. Looking at a few characteristics, I mean, it is, as I mentioned, emerging planners, basic plan, resource constraint. Typical issue, few payment touch points, high fraud. Developing strategy, roadmap is in place, but no real-time processing, high chargebacks. Operational challengers, clear plan, weak execution, and the struggle integrating new methods. Competent executor, they know how to do, they're doing it properly, but they need innovation and they need to improve on the fraud. Visionary leader, they maintain a leadership through innovation, and they excel primarily in all areas. So these are not definitions that we gave as Visa. This was a result of your answers. I mean, and now you were looking to, and you answered to all the 15 questions that we were submitting. And if you did not participate in the survey that we had last year, I mean, again, please feel free to reach out. I mean, we will share the questionnaire with you, and we will see where you stand in the different area. Of course, this is something that we do as part of our partnership with AFRAA. So there is no cost involvement, no cost involvement and no commitment of the partnership. So please, if you didn't participate, reach out via emails and we can share the questionnaire, and then we can see where you fit in terms of airline in these categories. So why is important to act now? Why we are having this workshop today? There is a digital shift in bookings and payment. Passenger expectations are growing. They want instant and secure option. They find this option elsewhere already. So if you're not able to provide them, you lose the customer. There is a stronger and there is a regulatory pressure for stronger authentication. So you need to be compliant. As Maureen saying, compliance is the first priority, and where you cannot really skip it. And then the competitive benchmark is changing. I mean, it's your peers, your airlines from elsewhere, you've seen in data, you've seen in the statistics that we were showing you, are improving. They're more advanced in fraud, in real-time decisioning. So this is the moment to close the gap that you have in the continent versus other competitors, because if you keep on waiting, the gap will become larger and larger, and then you will really struggle to close it. So as Maureen mentioned before, it is an example. If we move from 78% performance today to an 83% performance, if you have like around 200 million of online sales, this lead to $10 million per year. And we will see through the use cases at the end how this is achievable. We've been working with airlines that had similar KPIs, similar performance, and this is the kind of improvement that we have been delivering as Visa to these airlines. So we're not talking about something impossible. We're talking about something that is achievable, and you should really look forward to achieve. Of course, then you will lower dispute and higher lifetime value of your customer. Now, it's not only about revenue. You will have better data, leads into better rules, better approvals, and then even more data. So cost reduction, fraud, chargebacks, manual handling, customer loyalty, smoother checkout, fewer failures, operational agility, and then more and better data that can derive also from your payment analytics and then can lead into better decisions. So you see how then we can consider that improving the performance lead in an overall domino effect where other what they call collateral benefits can be achieved and improve even further your revenue. So the lesson for the maturity index. Team alignment within the airlines is a recurring weakness. Architecture modernization is the biggest technical gap. Fraud prevention and KPI monitoring are underutilized. Visionary leaders show the model: real-time processing, robust security, seamless experience. Now, from insight to action, what is that you should start doing? Identify where you are in terms of cluster. That is, again, reach out if you didn't participate. This will allow us to understand and prioritize what are the quick wins. By understanding your existing situation, it's easier to start and go into more precise actions. Improve the data quality in payment. This is the very first thing. If you struggle in understanding how you're performing, you cannot improve it. You cannot improve what you're not measuring. Then, of course, optimize your relationship with your acquirers, have the right gateway rules, and before starting, treat payment as a strategic revenue lever, not just as a backend process. This is the true mindset. I mean, it is if payment is considered as a real revenue enabler and not just as a process, benefit will start coming because you will start really looking and monitoring the performance. Collaborate internally, build cross-functional collaboration from strategy to commercial, from finance to revenue management. Have the right momentum and build the right task force. And use data and KPI to track your performance. Again, important, measure what matters. Authorization rate, fraud rate, abandoned cart rate in e-commerce. Leverage on AFRAA and Visa resources to improve and understand where you are today and how you can grow. So if we now look into all these nice words that I've been spending now, and how can these things become an operating model, how we can move. So let's see what could be a 90 days and an under 80-day plan. So in terms of 90 days, the first 90 days should really be invested in improving the quality of the data. Having some hygiene rule in your gateway, acquiring optimization, understanding if there is a problem in your acquiring structure and now you can solve it based on the review of the service level agreement, understanding how your bin ranges are improving and performing, and how are your market doing in terms of KPI. You will have, of course, large markets, like your own markets or large incoming markets. This, of course, if you improve the performance from your biggest revenue flows, automatically your bottom line improves. And do you have the right KPI in place? Do you see what is, in terms of dashboard, the reason of decline? Do you see how the performance is growing as is evolving? Under 80 days, building the operating model. So here is where we talk about what I said before, align together, build what we call the payment squad. It is have a true cross-functional team that has a target and build action, build a plan to monitor the performance on a monthly level. Understand what are the results in terms of fraud, in terms of authorization, how disputes are evolving, and what is the different change in terms of mix of payment. Test and learn, and understand, compare, and build a business case for selective modernizations. So what does it? What good looks like? It is how do you see whether you're doing well? So of course, stable approval, lower false decline versus peer, and better fraud performance, clean data flows supporting SKA and 3DS with low friction, multi-acquirer routing with clear failover, and continuous experimentation. And it is always try to challenge the status quo. These are all elements that are important and give you the feeling, give you the perception that you are moving in the right direction to achieve a true improvement. Okay, so I think here, if there are, I think, Maureen, probably some questions, so maybe we want to stop and collect them.
Thank you, Luca. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now the floor open to take your questions, and Luca can address those. So looking at the Q&A tab, we have someone who's asking, how does using the same provider for gateway and acquiring services impact acceptance rate versus different gateway and acquirer?
Arbab, if you want to take this question.
So, yeah, I can take this one. So I think we have seen airlines where we see they have multiple acquirers, and we have seen airlines where they have only one acquirer, one gateway. In my experience, if you have multiple acquirers, you have a couple of benefits. One is you can reroute a transaction. For example, one acquirer gets declined, you can resubmit that transaction with another acquirer, another payment gateway. Also, we have seen there's a difference in approval rates, especially when we see airlines with multiple acquirers. We always ask them to compare the gateway performance and the acquirer performance. And you will see that one acquirer is higher than another one. And it comes down to how do they use the transaction attributes. So for example, one acquirer might use there is a critical field which needs to be filled, the acquirer leaves it blank, which will cause a decline. Whereas the second acquirer is populating that field, which gets you an approval. So definitely having multiple acquirer, multiple gateway gives you an option of, optimizing your payment. If one gets declined, you can reroute that transaction with another acquirer, another gateway, and get it approved.
Thank you, Arbab.
Okay, I hope that answers the person asking the question. We have a few questions from Pastor Gospel Kamare. And the first one is, what are the main barriers causing payment delays and discrepancies for Nigerian airlines? And how can innovative payment technologies address these issues?
Okay, so I think it's a very broad question. We have to look into data to understand what's the main barriers for, let's say, specifically Nigerian airlines. And I'll provide you a few examples in the section that I'm covering, where we have options of, having engagements with airlines where we can then work with you, look at your data that is passing through VisaNet, and give you recommendations to say where are the opportunities, what is what is holding you back, and what can you do to optimize your payment.
Thank you. I hope that answers you, Pastor Gospel. And the second question from Pastor Gospel is, how can Nigerian airlines strengthen their payment reconciliation processes to reduce revenue leakage and improve cash flow management?
So I think I'm looking at both question 2 and 3 from Nigerian airline. Again, it's specific to them. We have obviously industry related recommendations, but to specifically answer what Nigerian airline can do, it will require, we have a couple of options. Either we have the merchant health check, which I will go through in a while, or the deep dive that Luca was talking about, where VC engages with the client, and we go through a range of topics, starting from loyalty to authorization to fraud to reconciliation. Everything is covered in that deep dive, where then we can look at your data and then give you recommendations accordingly.
Yeah, it will be much more effective. Thank you, Arbab. And I think if we can then maybe connect after this webinar with the person who raised the question, we will do a very personalized understanding of where the problem is and how we can solve it. Because that's somehow very, very specific, and without the data, I mean, it is we are not really able to solve the problem. No? I mean,
Yeah, I see another question, which is about best way to set up effective payment fraud rules, right? So I've seen there's two spectrum. One is either I've seen airlines where they have fraud systems, but it's not, there are no rules set up. Everything goes to a manual queue, and they're checking the manual queue, and then they're deciding if they want to approve that transaction or not. The other end of the spectrum is where there are smart rules, which are based on risk scores, which are based on, for example, if you're using CyberSource Decision Manager, which is one of the tools that Visa has for fraud rule setup. Decision Manager has a lot of indications. They have a lot of scores. They have a lot of AI built, where the fraud engine keeps on learning from the fraud in the region, in the market, in the sector. Those rules are then set up, and if you set up like real-time rules where you say, for example, if the risk score is above 50, then decline a transaction. That's a much smarter way of declining a transaction, because that is the probability of that transaction being fraud is very high. So you reduce your manual work by setting up very effective fraud rules, and also reducing declining false positives, because you're not declining genuine transactions then. It's all based on data.
Okay, thank you. And another question is, what Visa will be doing in case of default of payments from EasyPay agents?
So I think any party, and Luca, please feel free to add, any party that is connected to Visa. So you have principal members, right? You have issuers, you have acquirers. There are, due diligences on all these parties. Obviously, if there is issuer is attached to Visa, there are credit risk teams constantly monitoring how the settlement is happening. We reduce the limit sometimes, we increase the limit sometimes. So from Visa perspective, we have a CSR, the credit settlement risk team, constantly monitoring all the principal members on a regular basis. Where if we feel that a partner is on the verge of, let's say, running out of business, then that team steps in and they have measures to look at it. Obviously, it also is governed by the jurisdiction that the party is in. What are the local regulations? How are central bank or any other party that is managing that entity? How are they? What are the rules that they have to recover the funds accordingly? Luke, anything you want to add?
No, I think it's perfect, Arbab. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have from Air Mauritius, this is more of like sharing their point and their situation. So Ronnie says that the main pain points for Air Mauritius are rolling reserve from European payment gateway because airline business has become more risky than cross-border fee and proper localization based on where Air Mauritius markets are. This is just sharing their current situation. And I'm seeing some questions, a couple from Paul Karanja, 3 questions. So the first question from Paul Karanja, are there unique requirements or rules that may apply to airline merchants compared to other merchant categories?
So in my experience, no. Issuers don't have separate rules for separate category of merchants. Again, as I said, issuers are they have so just as, and when we go through the payment journey, I'll explain it further. But for example, you as a merchant, you have a fraud tool at your end, which is, let's say, decision manager. Before you decide to accept a transaction, it goes to the other end. Then the issuer has a fraud tool at their end, and they set up rules there as well. We also work with the issuers to tell them how effective rules look like. So we don't want them to decline transaction based on a merchant name. We always work with them to tell them, please don't have blacklist of let's say merchants to just decline every transaction coming from a merchant. Your rules should be smart. You should be looking at risk score. You should be looking at every transaction on its own. So in short, yes, the issuers don't have specific rules for one category versus another. But in some markets, we do see that if an issuer has a huge fraud from one of the merchants, they might have a separate rule for them to say, if a transaction is coming from XYZ merchant, I always want to step it up. I want to do authentication, and I want to only accept a transaction if it's a fully authenticated transaction. If it's not, then I don't want to accept the transaction. So it depends on the region and the issuer.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you start building your own reputation if you want, in very simple terms. So when it is, if you're causing fraud, and then you will most likely have in the future problems. So when it is, the more you improve, the more you will have an easy life in
And one small example, we recently worked with an airline where they had a fraud tool, but because they think we are anyway stepping up every transaction and we are authenticating a transaction, let's send everything for authorization. And if the issuer doesn't like, they can decline. Which in turn, what they were doing is they were sending like even bot attacks, which were like 500 transactions in a minute, which is a fraud attempt. They should have had rule for this velocity checks to say if there are more than, let's say, XYZ number of transactions, I should be blocking them, which then impacts the reputation of that merchant with the issuer risk engine, because you're sending all types of transaction to that issuer.
Yeah, thank you. The other question from Paul Karanja is, what risk and settlement considerations should acquirers be aware of when onboarding airline merchants?
So I think there's, for any acquirer to offer acquiring to airlines, they should be part of the international airline acquiring program. There are obviously a lot of requirements. How do you qualify for IAP? IAP is like it's like a document which is Visa, MasterCard, everybody else has agreed on, and it gives the possibility for airlines to acquire in other jurisdictions other than the headquarters. So for example, if Nigerian airline can acquire either in Nigeria or the first leg of the transaction. So if somebody is booking a ticket from South Africa to Nigeria, they can either have merchant country as Nigeria or South Africa, because that is the first leg of the transaction. So for airline acquiring, there's slightly more requirements compared to the other acquirer requirements that we have. But yeah, it is slightly more complicated because of the number of parties involved. And then you obviously have GDS involved, and you have payment gateways involved as well.
And probably from my side, Arbab, adding, an acquirer will also check when it is on before acquiring an airline, when it is what is the risk factor, when it is this is driven by, for example, your booking curve. I mean, how early the booking materializes. If you have a booking curve where a lot of booking comes ahead of time, then it's more risky for the acquirer, because in the meantime, the airline can have financial problems or change the network and change the routes, and this leading to refund, and it is an additional risk. So there are elements of risk that typically for the airline industry are perceived higher than other merchant category, because if you're like running a supermarket and you go to the cashier and you pay immediately and you take your bottle of water, there is basically no risk involvement. It is, while when you are transactioning high amounts, like for the airline business and ahead of time, this has a higher risk that normally the acquirer consider.
Okay, thank you. So in the interest of time, I suggest we move to the second presentation. We still have some on the Q&A and on the chat box, which we shall take at the tail end, and perhaps we may realize that they shall be addressed in the subsequent slides. So Ronnie and Osvaldo, just keep that on the ice, and we shall come back to you. And back.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen. And of course, and it is if for whatever reason of time we're not able to cover all the questions, and we really like this interaction, and please keep on asking. We are always available to cover them after the webinar. So I mean, it is please reach out, and we will have one-to-one sessions, or we will have multiple airline together if the question is the same. Okay, moving forward, and it is I leave now to Arbab, who will take us through more precise detail about authentication and authorization flow. And before starting, and it is the question that we have for the audience: do you monitor authentication and authorization rate? Option A, yes, we proactively monitor both. B, yes, but only authorization. C, only authentication. D, no, we don't monitor them. So please, I leave to the participant to answer.
Thank you for the responses. We'll be closing the poll in about 20 seconds. Thank you. And the poll is closed, and the results on the screen.
And again,
okay.
Arbab,
So I can, I can read it. Okay, so 50% of you said we monitor both proactively. 31% only monitor authorization. 6% only monitor authentication, and then 13% are saying we don't monitor any of the these two metrics. So let's look at why it's important, right? Why authentication is important, why authorization is important. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So let me start with a very generic, customer payment journey. On the bottom, we see the traditional 4-party model, which now has become maybe 6, 7, 8 party model, because there's more players in the ecosystem now. For example, you have the merchant. Merchant has a gateway. Then gateway can either be, gateway can have processing in-house, outsourced. Then there's issuer. Issuer can either have processing in-house or outsourced. They can have ACS in-house or outsourced. Then VisaNet, and then acquirer also has the same. And then there are risk and management tools at both ends. So as I mentioned, a merchant might have a risk tool, which is like decision manager. And then on the other end, the issuer has a risk tool, which, for example, in Visa world, we have a product called Visa Risk Manager. So issuers are using that risk tool. So there's a lot of tools, a lot of parties involved in a typical payment journey. But let's give a simple example to see why it's important to monitor both authorization and authentication. So if you start from the left side, the payment journey starts with the customer gathering information, right? So either they're looking at internet, your website, referral, and they're gathering information to buy the ticket. In this case, for example, they want to travel. They're looking at what is the cheapest, the best schedule of ticket that they can get. Once they gather the information, the next step is purchase decision, right? So there is one step where the customer gathers information. Either they go for the purchase or not. Let's say they decided to purchase. The first step is you as a merchant, when the customer comes to you and they book the ticket, they have confirmed which flight, which timing, seat, whatever. Then you go to the payment page. The moment they click submit payment and they upload their card details, then you have an option of invoking 3DS, which is the authentication stage, right? And we will look into the definition of what is authentication and what is authorization and the differences. So authentication is simply here. It's to validate that the card holder is the person who is authorized to use the card, is the owner of the card, right? So you're authenticating the customer. Any decline at this stage means that the payment journey finishes here, because authentication failure can either, so you have, if it's a fully authenticated transaction, you can have, the liabilities is on the issuer. So it's an ECI 5 transaction in Visa world. If authentication fails, then it's either two options. The merchant accepts the liability in this case. So in some cases, the merchant will say, no, I don't want to proceed because I don't want to accept the liability. And you will reprompt the customer to again try, or you will go into the authorization stage. So that's one level of friction where you should monitor authentication transactions, because there might be 10 transactions, for example, that is going into authentication, but only 5 are proceeding to authorization. And then all those 5 are getting approved, for example. So you might say, oh, my approval is 100% because 5 transactions came into authorization and I approved all 5 are approved. But you're ignoring the 5 that were declined at the authentication stage, which then brings down to your approval rate overall 50%. So we monitor and we recommend to monitor both metrics separately, so authentication separately, and then authorization separately as well. And then once authentication is done, authorization is done, the customer gets the confirmation, gets the ticket, and then there are some post-purchase, steps which can also cause potential disruption. So it could be, the customer want a refund, there is a chargeback, there is a fraud report that can also then, if the customer is not satisfied there, then it can, obviously this payment has happened, but then it can impact their future preferences. Because if they have bad experience with it, let's say refunds or chargebacks or fraud, then they might come back and say, next time I'll choose another airline. So while authentication authorization is very important, post-purchase, activities are also very important to keep the customer satisfied. Okay, next slide, please. So why improve authorization? We looked at, Luca touched upon it. Just to quickly reiterate, obviously you enhance customer experience. If I am a customer and I have, declines on a certain merchant page, nowadays it's, customers have a lot of choices. They can move to another merchant. They can, for Visa as well, they can pull out another card and start using another scheme. And also, for example, if it's a recurring event that I have to retry 2-3 times to get my transaction approved at a certain merchant page, I try to then tend to avoid that merchant because I'm not as confident in my card going through. The second one is transactional revenue. Obviously, Luca in his previous slide mentioned and showed you example of how improving your auth rate by few points results in transactional revenue, because this is the volume is already in the cart. If there are declines, you're basically revenue leaking from the cart. Then enable new payment technology. Enabling new payment technology also helps in driving your authorization. One simple example is, let's say, tokenization. So if you, for example, adopt tokenization, then there are certain decline regions, right? You have cards stored, for example, with you, and a customer wants to upgrade to a business class seat, and they have paid for the ticket, and you want to charge the same card for upgrade charges. So you can use, for example, stored token in this case. If the card holder's card is expired, with token usage and token life cycle, you will automatically get a updated expiry date for that card. So the transaction will go through, and you will also get the updated expiry date. So for all your stored cards, you will not have a huge share of expired cards in your decline regions. Look at next slide, please. Yeah. So here we just quickly look at what is authentication versus authorization. As I mentioned, authentication is the process of helping to ensure that the card holder is the rightful owner of the Visa payment account. It takes place using issuer selected authentication method. So in authentication, we have two types. One is challenge route, and the other one is risk-based authentication. So risk-based authentication is when, for example, the transaction goes from a merchant side. The issuer looks at the transaction and all the data available with that transaction, and they say, it's fine. I can see that it's the same device, it's the same IP. It's I'm familiar with this transaction. I don't want to challenge it. The risk score is good. I will approve it, and that's a risk-based authentication. There is no OTP sent to the customer, and the transaction is authenticated without even the customer knowing. The second is obviously the typical standard one, where an SMS or OTP is sent to the client to then authenticate themselves. Authorization is the process where a card issuer either approve or decline a payment transaction from a merchant. Again, this is based on the issuer policies and rules. This one, if a transaction is everything is correct, it comes to VisaNet. VisaNet validates some of the fields, some of the attributes of a transaction, and sends it to the issuer. It's up to the issuer to approve or decline a transaction. They have set up rules either at the risk level or at their ACS level, where they decide if they want to approve a transaction or decline a transaction. And there are some decline reasons which are beyond their controls. For example, even if an issuer wants to approve a transaction, but the cardholder doesn't have funds, it's beyond issuer control, it's beyond merchant control as well. They might have rules, as I was mentioning, setting up, for example, if the risk score is high, I don't want to accept that transaction. Maybe there's another rule where they might say, yes, if the risk score is high, but if it's a fully authenticated transaction, then I will accept a transaction. But if the risk score is high and it's a non-authenticated transaction, then I don't want to accept that transaction. So it depends on the issuer side, what rules have they set up. As I mentioned earlier, there's we hardly see that there are rules set up for specific categories, but issuers use some of these rules for regulatory purposes. For example, they might have, okay, I don't want to accept any transaction from a gambling merchant. And then all of those transactions will be declined with, let's say, transaction not permitted. There are some generic categories as well, do not honor, which again, the issuer doesn't want to disclose what the exact reason was, but they want to decline that transaction into a kind of a generic decline reason. We know this was a problem where a lot of the merchants were not getting the specific decline reason. Why am I getting the decline? And issuers were using it in a very, probably abusing the decline reason. That's why Visa came up with a rule where it can only be 5% of the decline reasons to limit the use of this generic do not honor decline reason. Yeah, if you want to move to the next slide. So this is a more technical slide. I just wanted to give a very high overview of authentication 3DS flow. So 3DS, as you know, it's a domain secure. That's what it stands for. And it's called EMV 3DS. So it's Euromoney, Visa, and MasterCard came together and came up with the protocol, the 3DS protocol. So in this one, if we look at the flow, right? So on the top left corner, that is the 3DS client, which is the merchant. On the right side corner, bottom left corner is ACS, which is the issuer. Acquirer is on the right side. And then the 3DS server, which is your 3DS provider, is on the top right side. So if you look at the flow, typically, a merchant, for example, customer comes to you, they submit, as I said, the payment details on the page. They click submit on the transaction. You then send an authorization request, which is step 1 to the issuer. Authorization request, when it's sent, the issuer checks and says, yes, this card is enabled for authentication. Either here they will decide two things. Either we want to approve this transaction as risk-based authentication because I have enough information. I don't want to challenge this transaction. Then the rest of the flow doesn't apply. It's just simply one request. Issuer says, yes, this is okay. And then it goes into authorization. But if, let's say, the issuer says, no, I want to challenge this, then further steps come in. So the second step is then, so the first step, as I said, was authorization request and authentication request and authentication response. Then the second is the CREC. So basically the challenge request and the challenge response. So the CREC is what flows from the merchant plugin side to the issuer side. Here, you should always monitor when you're looking at your authentication performance. You should always look at the challenge CREC timeouts. That is something that is in your control or the merchant plugin control. So if you're, let's say, submitting the CREC requests beyond a certain timeline, it times out and then the authentication process fails. So when you're looking at your authentication performance, always check if there is any CREC timeouts. Please work with your 3DS provider to say, we need to work on this metric and we want to improve because it's timing out and I'm getting failures because of this timeout, which is in our control. So once the challenge request is sent, the issuer, that's where the page goes into, there is a separate page that opens authentication, which is then the issuer directing the customer to enter the OTP. So that's the challenge response. Once it's a successful message, then the issuer then lets the merchant know that the authentication was successful. And there is a third leg, which is the response request, and then the response RS, which is the response. So basically in this one, what happens is there's a CVV value, which the issuer passes on to the merchant to be then added into the authorization message. So in summary, like there's two parts. One is the frictionless, where it's a very simple two-flow authentication request response. If the issuer wants to challenge, then there are 4 more steps that are followed. So once an authentication is completed, then the transaction flows into authorization. So as you see, it's more of a prerequisite for authorization. And here the difference is, if it's a successful authentication, there is a field called ECI value, electronic commerce indicator, that is populated as 05. What does 05 mean? It simply means that the merchant and issuer has participated in the authentication process. The customer was successfully authenticated, and any fraud is an issuer liability now, because issuer has participated in the authentication process. The other end is, let's say if you don't do authentication at all, and the issuer is also not challenging, then it's a ECI 7 indicator value. ECI 7 is basically merchant's liability. So if you're doing more ECI 7, any fraud that happens becomes then merchant liability. In between 5 and 7 is ECI value 6. That is a value which is populated when a merchant tries authentication, but it fails on the issuer side. So it's a merchant attempted authentication. In most cases, what we have seen is the higher approval rates are on 5. The approval rates, second best approval rates are on 7. 6 is the lowest approval rate, because sometimes the issuer is, ACS doesn't respond in time. The merchant attempts 3DS. And then the issuer has rules to say, if it's 5 or 7, accept. If it's 6, decline, because I can accept authentication. Maybe at this time I'm not available, but I don't want to accept the risk as well. So 5 and 7 has the best approval rate. 5 obviously has much higher, because it's a fully authenticated transaction, and 7 is the second best. We'll get back to this if anyone has any questions. I know it's we wanted to add a bit of more technical information to just explain how the flow works in authentication and authorization. So yeah, keeping with authentication, this is just a summary. As I said, authentication is like it's a 3-domain secure protocol, which was developed by Visa, Mastercard, and Euromoney. It enables the cardholder authentication in an e-commerce environment. It allows the issuer to verify the cardholder. And the authentication methods, as we spoke, it's 2. It's either frictionless or OTP. Recently, the pays as well, for example, Apple Pay, Samsung, Google Pay, they're all now ECI 5 transactions, because there is facial authentication. In some markets, issuers have moved to in-app authentication. So rather than doing OTP, they ask you to open the banking app, and the customer authenticates themselves. So there is biometric authentication as well, in addition to OTPs. So yes, authentication flows into authorization, and then clearing and settlements. That's a very high level flow of how transaction works. As I said, if a transaction fails in authentication, yes, you can still go into authorization, but might get into decline, because the issuer might be expecting 5 ECI 5 value, fully authenticated transaction, and also 5 becomes issuer liability, 7 becomes your liability. Here are some examples of the different parties involved. So for example, at a merchant level, what we call is a merchant plugin. These are the 3DS providers that you work with. So some examples are Cardinal, Arcot. At Visa level, we have our system called DS, which is a directory server. That's a server that sits between merchant plugin and the issuer control server. Access control server, basically we are like an engine between the merchant plugin and the issuer ACS. All of the messages that we saw in the previous slide, it passes through the directory server. There are some also checks that we do to make sure that the information that is flowing through is correct. So for example, for us, it's Visa Secure. Mastercard calls it, Master ID check, and American Express calls it Safe Key, but the protocols remain the same. On the issuer side, they have providers as well, which then completes the authentication process. It's either, for example, it's a Visa product by Cardinal called VCAS, or RCOT or RSA. So in each market, there are different parties available doing either at the merchant plugin side or the issuer ACS side. Then a quick introduction into authorization. Obviously, authorization is a very broad topic. We can have hours of session on just authorization, but just to give a very quick intro into authorization, as I said, it's the flow where it flows from the merchant into acquirer, and then acquirer into VisaNet, and then VisaNet forwards that request to the issuer. So a typical example is, which I was previously touching upon as well, is you have an acquirer which you fill, for example, the customer fills the checkout page, right? And they have entered the card number, details, and everything. Behind that checkout page, the acquirer takes that information and converts it into a language which is understood by VisaNet and by the issuer ACS. So every transaction has a lot of transaction attribute fields. Each attribute, so there are fields, for example, starting from few hundred fields, which are populated by the gateway or the acquirer. That field defines what type of transaction it is. Just one simple example is there is a field called POS entry mode field. If the value is 01, it means that it's a key enter transaction, which means the customer was in front of the computer and they entered the card number. If the POS entry mode value is 10, it tells the issuer that this was a card on file transaction. So it was a stored card where the merchant is initiating the transaction on behalf of the customer. Either sometimes it's CIT, sometimes it's MIT, and I'll go into the difference. So for example, one example is your Netflix. So or any other billing merchant where they're taking money from the cardholder without cardholder's involvement. So those transactions should be defined as card on file. So these type of information defines the type of transaction which goes to the issuer. The issuer host then thinks about all of the checks they have, the fraud rules they have, and then they either approve or decline a transaction. So authorization is involving all of these steps. And obviously, we saw the authentication even happens before that. In Visa, we have two types of auth clients, either dual message or single message. Most of the clients are now single message. Dual message is more of a older system where it's two separate messages used to be sent between issuer and acquirers. One used to be sent for authorization, and then a batch system used to be followed for settlement. Now a single message enables authorization and carrying to be accomplished through a single financial message. Yeah, look, so this brings me to the next section. I don't know if Maureen, do you want to stop for a few questions, or we can take it towards the end of this one, fourth section?
It all depends. We have taken note that there are some questions on the chat from I see Akleso Sky and from Ermias Haile Ethiopian Airlines. Since they're quite detailed questions, maybe we can take the second presentation and then come back to them.
Sure.
Okay.
So starting with the e-commerce session, and it says, let's have our multiple choice question. In your opinion, what is the main reason for payment failure for your airlines? We don't focus properly on its improvement. Option A. Option B, we have no internal resources dedicated. Option C, we miss investment and knowledge. Option D, either we are not tracking it or we are successful. So thank you for your answers.
Poll is ongoing. We'll be closing the poll in about 20 seconds. Poll closed and the results on the screen.
And
Okay.
Arbab, I'll let you.
Yeah, I can see. So 57% mentioned that they want to focus properly on its improvement. 29% they have no internal resources dedicated. 38% have investment and knowledge issues, and either 14% are either tracking it or not successful, or are successful.
That's
So I think, yeah.
Please,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, it's very interesting. I would say it's a very interesting answer. I mean, it's a lead probably to convergence with the survey that we did last year, where we see clearly that it is a payment need to be considered as a proper area of improvement. And it is the fact that the majority answer like A, and it is where yes, maybe they're tracking it, because we saw for the previous answer that most of you track it. But I mean, it is, what's the point of tracking it if it doesn't lead into any action? And that's where again our role and in our partnership with AFRAA also is to support you, and it's making sure then what you're seeing then lead into an improvement that is translating into additional revenue. So really hope that it is either through this webinar or afterward you can reach out and we can support you in improving. Please, Arba, you were also commenting.
Yeah. No, I was also going to comment the same, that 57% is a large number to mention that it's not tracked. Obviously, as you mentioned in the beginning of the session, that it's revenue in your checkout bucket. The customer has already done the research. They've already decided to purchase. They have entered all the information, the card details, and we should be doing anything to get that payment accepted. Obviously, there are certain things which are not in the control of merchant, but there are things which can be then looked at, improved, what can be done from your side. And I'll provide you a few examples of what is in control of a merchant acquirer versus what is on the issuing side. So these are some elements of authorization improvement across all parties, right? So here, I mean, if we look at it, there are maybe 50 more elements, but it's just few things I just wanted to point out. Some of it is applicable to the merchant, some of it is applicable to issuers only, some of it is applicable to both. Let's say, take example of authentication. We went through the flow right now, right? Authentication, if it's successful, very nice. Both parties have achieved the target where the issuer has authenticated the customer, the merchant has authenticated the customer as well, and is now proceeding with the authorization of that transaction. But let's say there is a decline. Let's say there's 10% failures on authentication. Authentication then can be split into, okay, we need to look at what are those 10% decline reasons. What is in my control versus what is being driven by the issuing side. So in authentication, for example, as I said, if there is a CREC timeouts, that's what the merchant can look at together with the merchant plugin to say, why are we not submitting the challenge request on time, which is causing failures. So that's something in the merchant domain that you can fix and control and have better authentication rate. Then the other side of the things is the issuing ACS is timing out. So when we work with the issuing side, because in Visa, when we have issuers, we have dedicated or assigned operation managers. We work with them on regularly on that side as well to say your ACS is timing out regularly. You need to have a backup or improve, or so we also work on that side as well, so that the entire payment ecosystem is improved. Then wholesale blocks, for example, that's another example. As I said, you have some merchants have risk tools at their end, where we have seen in the past with some merchants where one example is we received a feedback from one of the merchants that we don't see transaction from a certain European country. Is Visa not available there? and we checked their data, and we found out that they had set up a rule at their end which was blocking cards from certain European country because they had experienced fraud in the past. And someone went and set up a rule which says, I don't want to accept transaction from this issuing country. So the entire country was blocked. So when it's blocked, those transactions don't even go to authentication authorization. It's completely just payment failed. Same thing happens on the issuing side. If we see that they have implemented a block on a specific merchant or type of transaction, we work with them on a regular basis to improve their fraud rules. Card life cycle management we spoke about. So if a merchant is using tokens, right, token life cycle, then automatically solves for expired card declines. Not sufficient fund, again, it's more in the issuing control. If an issuer has a lot of not sufficient funds, we as Visa work with them from time to time, not for all products, but for certain products, to say, do you consider increasing the credit limit, for example, for certain card holders who have good credit history. If you increase the credit limit, you will solve for the not sufficient fund and you will have more business. Obviously, it's tricky on debit side, because debit side, then you have overdraft and things like that. So it depends. Do not honor is another bucket, where, as I mentioned, it used to be a very generic decline reason used by a lot of issuers. Visa is now limiting it, the use of it, to be 5% of their entire decline reasons. Yes, they can still use it, because sometimes if do not honor is driven by fraud declines. So if their risk engine declines a transaction, they don't want to tell the fraudster that it's a fraud decline, because they don't want to disclose that it's the issuer knows that it's a fraud decline. They just decline with a very generic do not honor. So again, in that case, we have limited that use of that decline reason as well. Again, CV2 declines, we will see a case study towards the end, where how a merchant, by changing some data elements of the CV2 field, were able to achieve higher approval rates by doing the change at their side. So again, there's a lot of elements. This was just few examples, and we will concentrate on 4 pillars of ecom. And then when we do the deep dive, obviously we look at everything that is at our disposal. Okay, if you can look at the next slide. So this is just an example of our merchant health check, and I think I saw it in the questions as well, what is included in this package. So as I said in the beginning, there are 2 services that Visa has. One is the merchant health check, which is more of a report, which compares you to the benchmark, and the benchmark is customized. So it's not like we're comparing you to some other e-com merchants. We'll compare you to similar airlines, and we'll give you, your performance versus the benchmark performance on these 4 categories. Acquiring corridor. So let's say, yes, you have US acquiring corridor, Europe acquiring corridor, and let's say Africa. How is your performance versus benchmark? Where is the gap? How much is the gap, and and there's some recommendations around it. Then merchant category. So for airlines, I think we have one MCC, which is very clear, but it's mostly for some other e-com merchants where they have multiple lines of business, right? So we then compare their performance across all of their lines of business. Maybe their overall auth rate is good, but when you break it up by merchant category, we can find opportunities where one category is much lower than the rest, and we then work specifically on that. And then channel, as we said, you can be looking at ECI 5, 6, 7, secure transaction versus unsecure, e-commerce versus Moto, all of these few other e-com channels that we look at. And then the 4 operational elements, which we will look at in the next slide. But it's a engagement that Visa has. And then if you need more information, Luca, you can probably provide more information on this, as well as the deep dive, right? Yeah, so this is one example. The numbers here are illustrative. So just to give you like this is one of the, let's say, output of the merchant health check, where we work with the specific merchant. These numbers are illustrative, but just to give you an idea. So 3DS, card on file, token, retries. These are the four things that we looked at in this merchant health check report. So in 3DS, what we looked at is the current, adoption of ECI 5 transaction was 0.9%. Whereas the peers or the benchmark was doing much higher. So we recommend increasing 3DS transaction or authenticated transaction, which then obviously reduces your fraud risk, because on fully authenticated transaction, the issuer is liable, not the merchant. So it saves money in terms of authenticating transaction and then saving you from chargeback and um, representments. Card on file. I provided an example where if we look at type of transaction on airlines specifically, you have certain customers that are your loyalty customers, right? Which and we have a case study about this as well, where they can store their cards. How do you then identify those transactions? Because when an issuer sees a card on file transaction clearly marked as a card on file transaction, the risk profile of that transaction is different than a key entered, because that customer is a recurring customer. The card is stored already. There are multiple transactions done on that card, and the airline is also saying this is my recurring customer. So the risk profile varies with the issuer, and we simply saying if you increase the card on file transaction from 86.7 to 86.8, this is what the gap between you and the benchmark is. You will have XYZ revenue. Token as well. We have seen tokens have better approval rates than PAN. For example, in this example, the token penetration is 7.2%. The benchmark is 8.6. So we are saying if you go to the benchmark level and do more tokenization, you will have another X amount of revenue generating because tokens have better approval rate. Then retries. So a lot of merchants, they have retry strategy. Some merchants don't. I think it's a good practice to have a retry strategy. So in Visa, we have 4 categories of declines, right? Category 1, Category 2, 3, and 4. Category 1 is basically we are saying these are the type of declines which the issuer will never approve. And these are lost card, stolen card, fraudulent transactions. So we should never retry on these, because then from the second attempt, there are SIF fees, the system integrity fees that come into play, which we charge the acquirer, and then the acquirer passes it on to the merchant, right? So category 1 is those type of declines. Category 2 is issuer cannot approve at this stage, which is you're not sufficient fund, your invalid account, the customer is not entering the correct account number, expiry date, these kind of things are category 2. Category 3 is data quality. There is something missing in the transaction. That's why the issuer cannot approve at this stage. You need to relook at this, fix the data quality issue, and then resubmit the transaction. And then category 4 are more generic response codes. So if you have, we will then obviously in this example, they are looking at where they can fix, and category 3 where it's more data quality issues has the bigger opportunity to say, if you fix these things, then you can retry on those, and then you will get some of the approvals back, because it was declined on first attempt, and then the second, third attempt it will get approved because you're fixing the data quality issues. On card on file, just to give a quick introduction, we have 2 frameworks within card on file. We have MIT and CIT. MIT is merchant initiated transaction, and CIT is customer initiated transaction. So if a card is stored and it's a card on file, as I mentioned, for example, your loyalty customers have an account, they log in, you can store their cards. Then whenever the customer comes in to book a ticket, that is a CIT transaction. It's still a stored card, but then from the data elements, the issuer can know that it's a customer initiated transaction. So basically, every time a customer is involved in initiating a transaction, just as in your case, the customer comes and he's booking a ticket, that's when it's a CIT. MIT framework applies to merchants like Netflix or iTunes, where you store your card and then they charge your card on a monthly basis, even though you're not involved in the transaction. And the reason these identifiers help with authorization is because in MIT, CV2 value is not provided because cardholder is not involved in the transaction. CV2 value cannot be stored by the merchants. It's not allowed. So if it's properly marked as MIT, the issuer knows that I cannot expect CV2 and they will approve that transaction. Whereas if it comes through as a normal e-com transaction, the issuer doesn't know and they will decline it because they are expecting a CV2 in this case. And we'll look at few examples when we come to the case studies of some of them actually how we implemented the changes and the results it had.
Yeah, just one comment from my side. I mean, it's looking at the number. Thank you, Arba. That was amazing. It's how even small percentage, small decimals can have a huge impact in terms of revenue because, of course, of the size of your business. So the moment you are improving the performance by even 0.2, 0.3%, this means hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's where the improvement really is the continuous always search for a better KPIs. And Maureen, probably if you have time, we can take a few questions here before going to the case studies.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for the presentation, Arbab and Luca. So we can take a few questions before we proceed to the next last section, which is on the case studies. So I'll start with Ermias Haile from Ethiopian Airlines. And his first question is, how can airlines engage with card issuing banks to address resolution and improvement opportunities related to bank declines and 3DS authentication failures?
So in obviously the channel that the merchants have is through the acquirer. So they can ask the acquirer to reach out to the issuer on their behalf. That's one of the ways on addressing challenges. The other ways, and Luca, please feel free to add, when we do the deep dive, we work with the airlines. We then look at the opportunities based on data that we have, and we segregate the opportunities into what is at the merchant side and what is at the issuer side. So at the merchant side, we work with them directly to tell them you need to make these changes, data quality, etc. And if there are some opportunities at the issuing side, then we as Visa will step in and do the reach out to the issuer on behalf of the merchant and tell them you're declining XYZ merchant, their data quality is okay, what's going on, and can we request you to review your risk rules? Obviously, it's a 50-50 success rate because issuers sometimes come back and say we this is our risk rule. We're not gonna change our risk rule till we see a behavioral change or a transaction quality improvement from the merchant side. Sometimes they also have set up a rule and they forget about it and come back and say, yeah, we have done the change and everything is okay. But it comes out of a deep dive that Luca's team conducts.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, is driven by large volume. Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello. Yes. So I was saying, sorry. This, of course, Arbab is part of.
I think we lost.
I think we can hear you, Luca. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. No, I was saying, Arbab, that's exactly something that we can do in terms of our support. Of course, is whenever there is large volume for a specific issuer. So it's not every single issuer that is where we are reaching out. Is need to be consistent, need to be relevant in terms of volume and addressable. So if we understand that it's because of any risk setting that the issuer might have, then of course we can facilitate. As then Arbab, you mentioned, of course, then is the issuer decision to either review the rules or not. We are not able to enforce it, but we can support the communication channel and highlight that potentially there is a reason of changing the rules that the issuer has put in place.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, the standard channel is through the acquirer. For the merchant, it's through the acquirer to reach out to either Visa or the issuing party. I've seen some airlines in the Middle East where they have, like, if they look at the top issuers for them, for their business, they have also established direct relationships.
Okay. The second question from Haile is, what's the possible reasons behind the high payment decline rates in African markets? Does the authorization rate you previously shared reflect only African issued cards, or is it the overall authorization rate for African airlines, including both local and international cards?
Yeah, let me probably answer the second part of the question, and then Arbab can eventually join. So in terms of data, it's overall, okay? It's not only African cards, it's the worldwide performance based on all type of card based on the different issuing countries. And sometimes the reason can be behind, if you see, Maureen, also linking back to the pool that we have, and the last question we asked them, the fact that there is no consistent search for improvement, okay, this leads into, if there is a problem, the problems persist, the problem remains. While other airlines in other regions, they tend to have probably a more proactive approach in solving the problem. Once the problem is solved, it's solved for good. And then the next time, the improvement rate is higher. So this is a part of the reason. This is, of course, where there is an element of risk that sometimes is associated with transaction with merchants in some part of the world. This could be an element that can contribute. But overall, as we said before, the more you have fraud, the more the risk, or the more the risk is associated to you as a merchant, and then this can drive into lower performance. It's very, very high level answer, but Arbab, if you have more technical elements, please feel free to add.
No, so I think you're right in terms of, if we look at because the airline business, right? If you're looking at even an airline that is in Africa, if you segregate by the issuing markets, probably your second, third biggest market will be outside Africa. It might be US, it might be Europe, it might be other countries. So you have to look at all over issuing markets. In terms of just generic, decline reasons, which is driving in Africa, I think not for airlines. I haven't had a look just specifically for airlines, but generally for e-com, it's either not sufficient fund, but then also fraud-related declines are also driven in the market.
Thank you for that. The third question from Ermias: how should chargebacks caused by payment processor errors be handled?
So again, it's case to case. There's obviously, we have to look at, there's process and steps involved for each type of case. If it's, let's say, I've seen cases where the merchant is not given enough time by the acquirer to defend or provide proof of, let's say somebody's claiming I did not fly, and it's already late. That's something you need to constantly monitor with your acquirer and your payment gateway to make sure that you are given enough time to provide the proof and provide sufficient evidence to fight the chargebacks. But again, there's no one way of saying this is the best approach. It has to be case to case. Like, for example, if the case is related to service is not rendered, which means the cardholder is claiming I did not fly. I've seen cases where the airline was submitting a screenshot of terms and condition, which was not a sufficient proof. The best proof would have been to submit the Luca, what do you call it when you
data from the boarding process.
Boarding process, yes. The manifest proof that the customer was part of the flight. that's a better proof rather than submitting your generic terms and conditions. So it depends on case to case and how do you fight that chargeback.
Okay, thank you. This one, I'm not too sure if you are able to divulge on rates based on the guidance you shared just before we started on adhering to competition laws, but I'll still read the question. And Haile asks, what are the interchange fees for African issued cards? Since these fees are not transparent, it makes it challenging for airlines to negotiate effectively with payment service providers.
Yeah, so as you said, interchange are the rates are confidential. The acquirer knows it, and one of the reasons is because the business model is that we set up so Visa sets up interchange. Visa doesn't make money from interchange. Interchange is basically what we charge the acquirer, and the issuer receives it. So there is no revenue coming to Visa from IRF specifically. In certain markets, we are required by central banks to publish interchange. Those rates are public and it's available on our website. So if you go to visa.com and you look for interchange, you will see in certain markets we have published rates which are available. US is one example, UAE, for example. And in certain markets where it's not required, then those rates are kept as confidential because, as I said, it's a business model between the acquirer then charges on top certain margin but again, airlines specifically have the choice to shop around, ask for different acquirers, what are the best rates they can get. Sometimes it's volume based, sometimes it's upfront discounts. So it should always be. I've seen airlines which have steady relationship with acquirers, but every 2-3 years they float a tender to ask for the best rates in the market.
Okay, thank you. And the last question from Hailey, what are the main reasons behind the 3DS failure from the issuer side? How much will be the overall contribution of decline?
So, as I said, you can overall broadly categorize the authentication declines into 4 categories. One is the CREC timeouts, which I said is in the merchant control. Then there is the customer closed the page. So basically they did not complete the authentication step. It happens sometimes either the pop-up or whatever is blocked. So that's the second category. The third one is issuer ACS timeouts. That's the major category where the merchant is asking for authentication response, but the issuer host is not responding in time and it times out because you see the authentication process has certain timelines. They have like timers. Because it's not it cannot be for minutes. It's within seconds, right? So let's say if it's one example is if it's beyond 30 seconds, then it times out and the authentication fails. Then the customer has to retry. So at the issuing side, the majority declines are on ACS timeouts. And there are certain markets which are, if the connectivity is bad, the issuers are timing out a lot, which then contributes to authentication failures.
Thank you. And to respond to Ronnie regarding presentations, yes, we shall share the slides as well as the recording after the webinar with everyone who registered to attend. So Arbab, we can take the next set of questions after the case study so that we ensure we really keep within our timelines for the presentation. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. I'll probably cover the first case study and then Arbab will cover the remaining 2. This is an example of the support that we gave to an airline here in SEMEA. Of course, was a large airlines given the volume of improvement, but we were going through a very specific deep dive. I mean, it's basically screening all the performance and all the KPI of the airline. And by implementing our recommendation over a period of a year, they increase the performance by 3 percentage points. That was leading into $90 million additional revenue. So again, you can do the math, how large is the airline, but it is in this case, we had $90 million adding to their revenue at the end of the year. which honestly is really important. I mean, this contributes to the profitability. We know how the margins are in terms of percentage for the airline industry, and it was a very, very strong improvement. Also the other benefit that this type of improvement, they remain. So I mean, the moment again, the moment you have raised the bar from 81 to 85, I mean, the following year you are starting from 85 and you're going further up. I mean, it's important, as you were saying. I mean, as most of you said, I mean, you're not able to follow up directly on the KPI that you monitor for authorization and authentication. And this is an example on how we can support you. And again, please feel free to reach out. We can do an assessment of the addressable improvement, and then we can provide you very quick recommendation on how to achieve it. So typically the time that is needed to achieve the improvement is relatively short. It depends, of course, on your booking window, but I mean, we're talking about in a few months you can already see the additional revenue coming in. And I move to the second one. Just we go a little bit quick for sake of time. I leave our explaining us this.
Sure. So this is another example of airline in the market. This is the card on file, which I spoke about earlier. So we saw one airline in the Middle East. They had customers that stored cards, so they had like a good percentage of their recurring customers, loyalty customers, and they were not marking those transactions as card on file. And we saw that the 1 or 2% transaction that they were marking as card on file had higher approval rate compared to the non card on file. So we asked them, what is your percentage of loyalty customers? They're storing cards. Yes. Then why are you not marking it as card on file? And it's a very simple technology change. You basically reach out to your acquirer. There is a field called POS entry mode. Instead of populating 01, you start populating 10. And this is done either by the payment gateway or the acquirer on your behalf. But this simple change resulted in approval rate of uplift of 6% gross and 2.2% dedupe. Quickly, the difference between gross is all your attempts. So basically, if someone is, even if a customer is trying 10 times, we will take those 10 retries and then calculate the success rate. Whereas dedupe is a logic where we take out the retries. So basically, if we see in the 30-day window a customer tried once and got declined, and there are certain elements like the same amount, same merchant, same card holder retrying the same transaction, then we look at the 30-day window for a card not present transaction, and we take out the retries, and then we say what is the dedupe approval rate, which is like eventually the card did go through. So the previous example which Luca was saying, if you looked at the gross approval rate was 86, the dedupe would be 92, 93 because it eventually went up to some transactions were recovered by retries. Then the next one is stored credential we spoke about. So let's move to the next. The next one is an example of marketplace. So we were reached out by one of the merchants in it's a global merchant which had low auth rates in Saudi Arabia. We looked at what's driving the declines. As I mentioned previously, we looked at the sub-merchant categories, and we saw that one of the merchant category is populating CV2 value in a field which is 44.10. It is a CV2 field. So basically for customers where they were we saw the difference that if the CV2 field is bypassed, there are three values in the CV2 field. Either it's populated, either it's left blank, or then either the merchant is saying, I'm bypassing, I'm choosing to bypass. We saw that when we looked at this field three ways, the approval rate was the lowest when the merchant was saying, I'm choosing it to leave or populating the message that I'm leaving it blank or I'm bypassing. Whereas if they left it blank, they had a much higher approval rate. So it was a simple change. We said, please stop populating this field with the bypass and leave it blank. And populate it, of course, where it's available. But if it's not available and it's a card on file transaction, properly mark it as a card on file and then, leave it blank. that one change led to 22% approval improvement, and it was worth 7.1 million PV annually for the merchant. So these are just simple, quick examples of some of the engagements we've had in the past, where we worked with the merchant. Some of them, obviously, as Luca mentioned, was throughout the entire year and required, multiple levels of engagement, different teams involved, and the changes took over a period of 1 year. Some changes were from the issuer side, some from the merchant side, some from the acquirer side, and some were pretty simple by just fixing one field. So that's going back to when you look at your authorization authentication performance, you should try to dissect this by all different data that you have available, by acquirer, by type of transaction, by card, by ECI, by whatever, and then try to see where your performance is lagging versus the other type of transactions you have to kind of come up with opportunities.
Yes, and if I may say, but that's what is really amazing, because by sometimes fixing a very simple parameter, and it is that of course you need to know what you're looking for, and that's where we can help you. And it is because if you don't have the local expertise or the local amenities, but by identifying the root of the problem and fixing it, sometimes very often it's just one parameter that as Arba said before, instead of 0, 1, you put 1, 0. And by doing that, you achieve a few million of dollars. And that's where really we are really keen to help you and get in touch. I mean, it is an understanding together where we can support and how we can act. Because yes, there is an element of infrastructure. As like Arba said before, connectivity. There is an element of funds in sufficient funds or not sufficient funds. But I mean, it is by sizing the addressable opportunity and then acting, I mean, it is in a relatively short time, you can achieve really important results. I mean, it is, and that's where, I mean, it is. We hope that this webinar, I mean, it is, has been helping you understanding a little bit more about payment. I mean, it is. Arba, thank you for the great expertise that you've been providing. But also, you know that now, I mean, it is, you can reach out. You have from our side very strong availability in supporting you and working together in improving your revenue performance. And I think if there are a few questions, Maureen, for maybe if you have still time, we can take them. Otherwise, maybe later on, when it is on, we can answer for whatever we cannot answer directly now.
Thank you very much, Luca and Arbab, for the case studies. Now, we have quite a number of questions. I think it will all depend on how much you can address the questions, and then the rest we can see how to engage post-webinar. We already have from the earlier presentation, I think it was the first one, that we need to do an interactive session with Nigerian carriers to really get to understand better some of the specific issues that they are experiencing and how that can be supported. So I think as we do that, we may also need to see if there are any further questions that cannot be addressed today, how we can address that. So we will take, I see we have from Iskai, and earlier on we can take the ones that were quite on standby since earlier on. Does Visa work with other payment gateways other than CyberSource? That's from Ronnie.
Yes. So basically, payment gateways are scheme agnostic. So CyberSource, for example, can route VisaNet, MasterCard, Amex, all kind of transaction. Similar to CyberSource, MasterCard has a gateway called MPGS. They can route any schemes transactions. So gateways are mostly scheme agnostic.
Okay, thank you. And then Ronnie asked again, how can African airlines like Air Mauritius secure better merchant service commission from acquiring banks where their main markets are in Europe?
Luca, do you want to take that one?
No, I think it is the first piece, of course, as Arba was saying before, is launching an RFI RFP. It is then and then I think also the Airline International program that it is the acquirer need to be part of as a role over there. But again, happy to reach out with Ronnie later on and discuss more in detail.
Okay, thank you. And from Sky Akleso Zero, our first question is, what is included in Visa Health Check package? And second question is, what is required from an airline looking for Visa Health Check of its digital payment system?
So in terms of the health check, first of all, we look into from our side into your performance. We see the data. At that point, we are able to size the level of engagement and how important is for us in terms of effort. If is, I would say, a very simple answer, it's happy to support and provide. If it requires a larger investigation, of course, there is an element of cost is involved. Sometimes we can go on a reward model. The more we find, this is linked on what is the improvement that we deliver. So the more we find, if we don't find much, the charges are very low. But it is ideally, first we assess the situation, we understand the addressable opportunity, and then we can see how we can proceed. Often we can also have some market development funds that can be deployed. The important thing is that I think we start looking at the opportunity. And sorry, Maureen, the second part of the question was, if you can remind me.
What is required from an airline looking for Visa Health Check of its digital payment system?
No, it is again. It is from an infrastructure perspective, not much. It's more about the willingness of improving, and then if the effort and the project is beyond a certain limit, there might be some commercials involved. But that's something that we are normally keeping very, very limited, and again linked to the results that we deliver. So
And just to add to Luca's point, the analysis is done on VisaNet data. So we already have the data we will have the data for that merchant. So we will be done on our end. Unless there is some, missing elements, we can then work with the merchant, but then it's most of the analysis is done on VisaNet data.
Okay, thank you, Arbab. And the third question from Akleso, I think this one can be tackled post-webinar on a bilateral basis. He asks, based on Visa experience, which are the best acquirers and payment system providers for Africa market, which can easily onboard local cards, mobile money, etc. So I think that can be tackled on a one-on-one after the webinar.
Yeah, probably, because every market might be. Africa is a very large continent. Not all of them has the same presence, so it's better we probably discuss it on a one-to-one basis.
Okay. Maybe you can take the last two questions, and the rest we can try our best to do that on email. So the second to last will be from one of our attendees. The name is not indicated. What are the pros and cons of including payment orchestrators into the payment ecosystem for airline merchants?
Okay. So just to clarify, do they mean payment orchestration by retrying? If that's the question, so payment orchestration normally is like, we have parties that can help you retry a transaction. So I have seen one airline which has an in-house orchestration. So basically they will try, a customer submits transaction, they will try with one acquirer, it fails, they will route the same transaction to another acquirer. It fails, they will retry the same transaction as ECI 7, as ECI 5. So they will try multiple combinations before they give up on a transaction. So in that case, they've already tried 3-4 times while the customer just waited for a couple of seconds on the screen, and they've tried to recover their transaction as much as possible. So definitely we have looked at the retries where let's say if the decline is because of data quality, a retry and orchestration can help with recovering that transaction.
Thank you. And the last question that we can take for today will be what report do you recommend airlines use to measure the approval rate of the approval rate performance across markets? Is it better to use deduped report with multiple declined attempts removed or attempts included performance?
Gross.
I'm not sure I understand this.
Yeah,
What is
so it's the difference between gross and dedupe, right? So I think gross is good for customer experience journey, because any decline is a decline, which causes customer to retry. In terms of measuring the final impact, dedupe is the better metric, because let's say if you look at only gross, you're looking at some of the reasons which have already been approved, so it's not the correct opportunity size. So for the bottom line financial impact, you should look at dedupe to say what is the actual opportunity on the table. But from a customer experience perspective, from why did it happen 3 times that we had to go through, the customer had to apply or retry 3 times, you should also look at gross. So we look at both, but for the bottom line opportunity calculation, then we look at dedupe.
Okay, thank you. So at this point in time, we'll bring this to a wrap. I think there's something that's come from Ronnie. Maybe we can take that and we wrap up. What is the importance of a fintech company or program manager in acquiring or issuing project? I'm not too sure if this is clear.
If I can get a bit more context,
There
obviously.
We can probably reach out to Ronnie later and ask more details, but please, the answer is not the right one. We will reach out, but please start.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for your attention and for really engaging with our experts from Visa to really get a deep dive and understand how to enhance the airline payments systems, landscape in Africa. And I want to thank our colleagues from Visa, Arbab and Luca, for working together with AFRAA from the onset of the time we were doing the survey to the white paper and now to this webinar. And there are some airlines actually who have been engaging with Visa from the outcome of that survey. We want to encourage those of us who would want to also continue with that discussion with Visa. This is a good opportunity to do that, how they can support you to really answer questions. We have a take home from our airlines in Nigeria that we need to do some focused session where we really get to unpack, understand the specific issues in the country on airline payments and how that can be addressed through collaboration with Visa. So we'll do that as AFRAA. We'll come back to you on subsequent steps. And then for the presentation slide deck, we shall share that with you. And also for those who we could not manage to address your questions, what we shall do is we shall take the report and go on a one-on-one basis with Visa to ensure that all unanswered queries are addressed after the webinar. And we do encourage you, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any topical issues, any specific areas of focus or any partner that you wish us to bring on board to discuss and engage in such an interactive forum on a webinar format, please feel free to reach out to AFRAA Secretariat. You can send us an email at afra@afra.org. We'll be happy to see how we can make that happen for you. From our side of AFRAA, we are very happy and we want to give the opportunity to Visa. Do you want to do some final remarks, Luca, and then we'll close this?
Thank you, Maureen. As a final remark, I mean, it is thank to AFRAA. I mean, it is amazing as usual when it is to organize this webinar. I thank really to all the participants. It was very rewarding. It was very interactive. For us, of course, we are aware of the diverse expertise of the audience. So we try to balance some very technical questions and topic with some more generic and strategic. We hope that we have made an interesting session for everybody, regardless of their expertise on payment. And again, as repeated multiple times. It is don't be shy, reach out. We can start by including you in the airline payment maturity index by answering a simple question, and then we can start looking at the first KPIs and understanding together whether by changing a small parameter you can improve maybe by $500,000 your revenue, or if by a more structured engagement, then we can achieve even higher results. So Maureen, again, thank you very much, and thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much.
Luca and Arbab. And just to, before we close, I'm looking at the expectations that were expressed at the beginning of the workshop. I'm happy at least we've managed to tackle that, enhanced understanding of payment challenges, gain insights into common payment issues faced by African airlines, including delays, discrepancies, inefficiencies. What are the best practices? What are the solutions recommended on airline payments? And learn about effective strategies, technological solutions. So we're happy that we've managed to address all that in this discussion. And from AFRA, it's bye-bye and see you at the next webinar.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.